Hi, and following hot on the heels of my vlog on why so many guilds are stuck on 3 out of 10 Mythic in Nighthold, what I'm going to do is start to talk about some sort of wider issues now in terms of being stuck anywhere. And this series, and it's going to take basically the whole week because there's a lot of facets to it, it's going to be on recruitment in Mythic guilds. Now, I could just start talking about this on a rambling vlog, and 3 hours later I might just about stop, and I'll have come back on certain points and gone round and round in circles on others as well. So what I've thought I'll do several shorter ones instead, focusing on key themes. Now, and this theme is basically about, are there too many Mythic guilds, and is this why there are so many problems? In the next one, I'm going to look at the process of recruiting for Mythic guilds, which might be more of an informative one than a vlog. Then I'm going to go on where people go wrong, in my opinion, when either they're offering themselves up for as a potential recruit in a Mythic guild, or from the point of view of the Mythic guilds themselves, where some mistakes happen. And then looking at side issues in terms of the game that might be putting pressure on Mythic guilds as well. And then I'll probably finish off with a nice Q&A. Sometimes you get people who put really interesting comments down there, and I'm not able to reply to all of them, but some I try and reply to, but sometimes the reply doesn't go into enough detail to do it justice. So what I'll probably do is a video round about this time next week where I go through some of the more interesting comments or the more interesting discussions, because sometimes you get really good discussions between different people posting on it, and explore those in a bit more detail as well. So this one is very much about why there is so much pressure on Mythic guilds to recruit. Now, on the face of it, it's quite simple. We have to, when you're going to try and work out why it is, and of course this is going to be laden with opinion. You know, this is all subjective. It's from my perspective as someone who's trying to recruit for Mythic Plus, behave yourself, Mythic raiding, as well as someone who has recruited in many expansions, going right back to vanilla as well. And it's simply this: if you're going to say that you're finding it very, very hard to recruit, you're not getting very many good, at least good quality applications, and even when you go out and try and find people, you're not finding very many either, then it's this simple. There are so many spots available in Mythic raid guilds, and there are so many people looking for them, and the number of people that are suitable is much less than the number of spots available, which means that when you're trying to attract people, you can easily go and try and recruit someone who wouldn't actually be your best player. You could look at this person and go, okay, you'd be quite good for our roster. You wouldn't be our best player. You wouldn't even be close, but you'd be about average. And then they'll turn you down for someone 200 ranks higher, because such is the desperation across the board that a relatively modest player can get into a much higher level guild, especially if they play classes or specs that are very much in demand. Now, from my point of view, there's potentially an extra pressure as well, which is the faction thing. Now, you could argue this is a bit of a side issue, but I ought to get this out of the way as well, just to sort of highlight that. But I'm an Alliance player. I'm in Alliance guild. Duh. So I have an extra little pressure. So when I look at people who are available, most of the people who are available are Horde. So for me to persuade them to come to ours, we're not just persuading them to transfer, because that's one thing straight away. You look through, WoW Progress is a really good place to look for people, but more about that in the next video. And a lot of people will say that they're not willing to transfer. Now, that could just be that they can't afford to transfer, especially when they consider, it's not necessarily one character they need to transfer. There'll be a few alts as well, and they don't really want to leave those behind because they're used for professions, or they just like playing on them, in terms of Mythic Plus dungeons and pug raiding and stuff like that as well. So it's extra expense just to transfer at all. But then when you're asking them to change faction as well, that's a massive increase in cost. So because of that, a lot of people turn you down. And as I say, being an Alliance guild, there are very few people who are actually Alliance players and willing to transfer. Now, there are some Horde players who will be willing to transfer, because at the end of the day, if the guild is right for them, then and most players will have the disposable income to do that. Not all the time, but, it's not hopefully a common thing to change guilds. But a funny thing happened last week. I approached someone who was an appliance? Yes, they were an appliance. They were a washing machine, I think. No, they were an Alliance player. And I said, I will start off, because I've seen them somewhere, but, sometimes they'll say, oh, I've just found a guild. Because that's the other thing I see. As soon as you flag yourself as looking for a guild, you will instantly get a dozen friend invites from people like myself, who are recruiting, who are actively, wanting to talk to you. Most of whom will be totally unsuitable. They'll be in guilds that are not up to your standard, but, some of them may well be. So I contacted this guy, and I always sort of ask, are you still looking for a guild? I've seen you on wherever it is, official forums or WoW Progress or wherever I've seen them saying they're looking for a guild. Oh, are you still looking for a guild? So this guy said, yes, I am. And so I started talking about it. So I said, what sort of things are you after? That's what I usually start to talk about. And he noted this. He said, oh, I see your alliance. I said, yes. And I thought that would be a good thing, because he might have been expecting, well, so many Horde guilds, I'm probably going to end up having to go Horde because, there's so few alliance guilds looking. No, it was the other way around. He says, oh, I'm sorry, I've decided to go Horde. It's like, okay, you found a guild then, have you? No. He's just, without even having found a guild, and with our guild potentially being suitable and would cost him less to move, he's just decided to go Horde. So, and the reason why Horde guilds, are so popular is there was a time in the recent past, I would say, when their racials were just more powerful. So a lot of the top-end raiding guilds went Horde. Lots of other people followed suit as well. Now it's not so much. There's a bit better balance. But you've still got that thing where they're far more Horde than Alliance. But anyway, that's a little side issue. Now, if it were just that, because the reason I mention that is people might be saying, well, it's because you're an Alliance player. That's why you're struggling so much. There isn't that struggle elsewhere. But actually there is. There's a lot of people complaining about this, and Horde guilds as well, saying how difficult it is to recruit, and at least recruit suitable people. I need to get some people in this weekend, for example. I could easily fill up the roster this weekend. No problem. I could just go, yeah, you're the best of whatever is interested in us. Yeah, in you come. But it's no good if then that means you can't do what you need to do in your guild. Like, we cleared 7 out of 10 mythic bosses, as well as the last 2 heroic bosses on our Wednesday farm clear, as well as had time to do some progress. Now, that was pretty good. Now, if we just got in 5 people off the streets and tried to do that next week, wouldn't really happen. In fact, I was in a guild on the same server I'm back now, so I've come back, during Hellfire Citadel. Unfortunately for quite a short time, because I joined it and they're already having recruitment problems. And they got some people in. Now, they actually weren't totally unsuitable, but they were a step down from the people that they had replaced. And it had to be quite rapid, because several people left at once, all is a bad time. And in a particular reset, we didn't manage to clear all the farm content. Like, there was the Zul'Harak, I think it was the last boss that we'd cleared at that time. Didn't kill it. And so what was basically recognised in that guild is the guild's taken a step back. Now, to my mind, it was worth pushing forward and going, okay, let's build it back up. It wouldn't have taken that long, but the leadership had, obviously they'd come back from, they'd been going through weeks and weeks of this, and they'd just about sort of thrown the towel in. So they then decided to just stop raiding rather than go backwards. But that is what can happen to your guild. You may potentially go backwards if you have to get in people who are not as good as the people that they are replacing. Now, again, when I come to the, coming back to the theme of, are there too many mythic guilds, and what do I mean by that? So, as I talked about in the last vlog, there are a lot of guilds stuck on 3 out of 10 mythic. They can kill, they kill the first boss relatively easily. It's not that difficult. Then you sort of get stuck on chronomatic anomaly. That's a step up. That is a step up. And then usually, there's a bit of a boost when you kill that, because Trilliax is not as hard as chronomatic anomaly. After that, you get a choice of 4 bosses. And I think, as I said in the last video, some people just choose to do the wrong next boss. They choose to do, what happens is people see more people have done Croesus first. So we'll do Croesus next. And then people struggle at it and eventually fall over the line. And then more and more people have killed Croesus as the 4th boss. So then everyone coming up behind them goes, well, Croesus is the 4th boss. Whereas sometimes maybe it's not. Maybe you'd be better off doing a different one. But that's by the by. So the issue is that you've got these guilds where a lot of them are not mythic quality raiders. That's why they can't push further than 3. But some of them will be. Within those guilds, there will be some good players. It might only be 1 or 2. It might be 5 or 6. But there will be some good players. Players who are easily capable of fitting right in with a guild like myself on 7 out of 10, or maybe even 8 out of 10. Or maybe with a bit more experience, even the ones that have cleared it by now. But they're in those other guilds and not getting any further. So I sort of see a situation, again, this is subjective, this is my opinion, where you've got all these guilds, most of which are not really Mythic guilds. You'd sort of say they were heroic guilds that have done a few things on Mythic. Now, on the face of it, that's actually great. Good for them. Because we had an issue in Warlords of Draenor where this was the first time where normal and heroic mode was flexible. So you could have as many or as few as you like. And a lot of these guilds, it would tended to be fewer than 20 in them. More like 15 going each week. Rather than 30, you could go up to 30. And so you might imagine that these guilds had huge rosters. But they generally didn't. I'm not saying they never did. But generally didn't. Generally more like 15. And then when it came to then, you've cleared normal, you've cleared heroic. There's still some time before the next tier comes out. So you want to do a bit of Mythic. Of course you do. So then what you do is you say, right, okay, we've got to completely change the way we do things. Because heroic mode, it's like, as long as we've got a couple of tanks and enough healers, and enough DPS, of course, the balance of rolls is fine, then it doesn't matter. If one night you take 15. You know, someone has to drop out halfway through the night. Oh, sorry. Not a problem. As long as the roll balance is okay. It's okay. It's fine. See you later. No hard feelings. Next night, there might be 18 of you. The next night, there might be 12. Doesn't really matter. As long as you've got those key rolls in there, then it's fine. You just go with whatever. Mythic, suddenly different. You've got to have 20 people. You've got to have 2 tanks. Certain number of healers. Most of the fights, 4 healers. You might need 5 on one. You might need 3 on a couple. And then the rest DPS. And the DPS all have to pull their weight. Now it's more difficult. And you're expecting them to turn up regularly so that you can always have that 20 people. Don't have to be exactly the same 20 people. But it's better if it is. But you do have to have 20 and those specific roles done. You can't just say, okay, we're a DPS down tonight, we'll just take an extra healer. Ain't going to work like that. Or get a healer to go DPS spec, but they actually can't play the DPS very well. Not going to work. It's not happening. Same with, if a tank's off, you can't just get the DPS with the best tanking off spec to go tank. Maybe they'll be good enough and it's fine, but maybe they won't. And then you're snookered. And you're completely snookered. And in WoD, a lot of people, just didn't do that. They didn't take that step up to even killing a few bosses on Mythic. Now they have, so you can actually see that as a positive thing. But then the other side of it is, in these guilds, you think about it this way. Let's say you've got 2 or 3 good players in those guilds. And they think, this is great, they're doing Mythic dungeon bosses. And, the next one, okay, it's really tough, but it is a step up. But we'll get there eventually. What if you were to tell some of those players, do you know what? You've killed 3 out of 10. But even in 5 weeks' time, you'll still be on 3 out of 10. Would their attitude still be the same? Are some of those players staying in that guild because they think that you're going to get there any time now? Or would they still be happy staying in that guild? Because some are. Obviously, it's not all about progress. You actually want to be in a guild you enjoy. And if you enjoy being with those people, maybe some of them are real-life friends. I've never quite got that myself, needing to be in a guild with your real-life friends, because there's so many ways of still playing together and connecting through Battle.net. But different strokes for different folks. So, but some people like that. So, maybe they're willing to stay backhand. But I'll bet you there's several that are not. I mean, I had a comment, an interesting comment before, from someone in that sort of position. They were saying they know that, they're capable of doing more. Should they move on? And they asked me the question, you can see here, they asked me the question, what can I do to persuade these people to sort of basically get better? And my response to that would be, nothing, they're not going to. Why should they? It's a game. They are putting in as much time and effort as they want to do. And we shouldn't blame them for not putting in more. All you have to do is decide, okay, if that is that guild, and that guild doesn't require any more than that, then you sort of say, well, it's a casual guild. And if you're not a casual player, if you're more of a semi-hardcore player, then you need to move to a semi-hardcore guild. So I just sort of feel that there's a lot of these guilds where there'd be players who would ease that recruitment problem. Like, there are players in guilds in, never mind outside the top 1,000, outside the top 5,000 probably, or even worse, that actually could well be suitable in our guild. But we'd never see them. we'd never come across them realistically, because they would never think of applying to our guild, because they just think their guild's going to get there eventually. Or maybe even if they did, they might have limited logs for me to demonstrate that, because they've left it so late to move on potentially. And you know, and it seems to me a bit of a shame. And you're going to have this situation, I feel, where we are going to see more guilds. We always see more guilds. We are going to see more actual mythic guilds falling by the wayside. The ones who are not determined enough to go ahead. Because, I mean, this has been a thing as well about why guilds disband. And traditionally, a lot of the time, there's never one reason. There's never been one reason. But traditionally, it was because the leadership of a guild stepped down. There was no one willing or able to take up the reins. And so then what would happen is all those individual raiders, some of them, you always had a small number then stopped. It was always the case that it's almost like the only reason they kept playing the game was to be in that guild. So you always had a few stop, but then the rest of them would disperse themselves into other guilds, and you know, the cycle of life went round. But now you don't see that so much, and I think it's because there's a higher proportion of guilds are falling by the wayside, not because the leadership is stepping back or stopping playing, but because the raiders are, and then you can't recruit enough, and so you just end up in a situation where you go, because you might think it a bit strange with some guilds, you're saying they can't recruit. Well, why don't you just take the best of what you can get? It's better than collapsing, isn't it? But like I said before, if they're not up to a certain standard, even if it's quite, you always have a minimum standard. There's always a minimum standard for your guild to be able to make any sort of sensible progress. If they fall below that, then you know there's no point. There is no point, because you will go backwards, because they're not capable of killing the bosses you've already killed, let alone push in reasonable fast progress on the bosses you're on now. Do you know what I mean? Because I look at WoW progress and I look, there's loads of, I mean, you look at it and you think, oh, there's loads of people looking for a guild, whatever spec you want. Yeah, but most of them are not at all suitable. They might have the item level, they might even have the artifact level, but they just don't have the ability. And there's loads like that. And some of these, and I'm not even just talking about players who've got like 3 out of 10. Some of them have actually done more, because they've gone to a guild and, you know, they've killed a farm boss or two, and then they've been found out. There's quite a lot of these players, and you look at, you know, their guild history over the last few months, and they've been in probably 3 guilds in 2017, because they've thought they're better than they are. Maybe their guild's collapsed, or maybe they just thought they were a good player in that guild. They've moved somewhere else to a guild that's higher progress, and they've been found out because they're not actually good enough. And even doing a boss that is farm for everyone, and that's a lot. It's a lot more stressful, I would say, joining a new guild and doing a boss that's on farm for them, because they know how to do it and you don't want to cock it up. But at the same time, it's also easier, because everyone, if you do make a small mistake or something, other people can usually cover. And yeah, people still don't even perform then. And so yeah, I really, really think there are loads and loads more mythic guilds than there should be. I think that there are a lot of good mythic players trapped in these guilds, because they themselves maybe don't have the experience. You know, that usually, if a player's had experience of several expansions, they'll know that they're in a no-hope guild. They'll be able to judge the guild and go, this guild's going nowhere. But someone who isn't that experienced, and they, you know, maybe they've only just started playing at the back end of WoD, or maybe during WoD, but didn't really do great raiding. Maybe they did a few pugs, and now they're really wanting to do the proper raiding. They don't know. They can't judge their guild, because what are they going to judge it against? They've got nothing to compare it to. They haven't been in a better guild to compare it to. And it is an issue. And it's not anyone's fault, of course. It's not the fault of those guilds who are never going to really get any further. And when I say not get any further, I mean, at some point they will, because when 7.2 comes out, and we're all going to basically become a bit more powerful when that comes out, people, again, you know, will have that larger margin for error with DPS checks, and you'll be able to play more badly and still get through certain things. So, I mean, that's how raids tend to nerf themselves. There's 2 ways that raids generally, well, 3 ways, I suppose. Sometimes Blizzard just straight out nerf a boss, like they've nerfed Star Augur, for example. Sometimes it's just with gear. If you just keep doing a bit of farm content with gear, eventually you'll get there. But since Warlords of Draenor, this is not as easy as it was. Because you've got to bear in mind those guilds that are doing 3 out of 10 are only killing 3 mythic bosses each week. Now, those 3 first bosses, the item level of that gear is not as high as the later bosses. Because we have this sort of, ever since Hellfire Citadel, I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, we've had this sort of tiered approach to item level. You've got 4 different like item level bands within the same dungeon or raid. Now, yes, it can get Titan Forged or Warforged at the very least, and that helps out, and that will happen now and then. I mean, someone showed me a link to someone who had a 925 trinket, which they'd got from Raid Finder. So you can be very, but that's someone on the end of the lucky scale. By and large, because I thought Titan Forge, the way it was looking at the start of Legion, this is going to create this huge disparity between players. Like, you can almost be casual and have better gear than a Mythic Raider. Hasn't worked out that way, to be fair. I would say the people in our guild are pretty close together in terms of item level. So the luck is not, it's not as extreme as you might think. But, so, the people in those 3 out of 10, they're not going to be getting very high item level gear. They'll get decent item level, because if you keep running Mythic Plus and you keep doing those bosses, eventually something will become Titan Forge. But for the guild as a whole, that's like an individual person might get lucky. Guild as a whole, you're not really going to push to those higher item levels very quickly. So you need something else in the game to nerf it for you, and that can be a new patch where something comes in that makes you more powerful, like new artifact traits and things like that. That's assuming that they're even not, got enough artifact power to be able to get the new traits when 7.2 comes out, or something similar to that. Or maybe they just get lucky and get a better legendary, because all sorts of things like that can boost you through as well. But yeah, so I mean, in terms of, just to summarize there, so I don't go on for too long, in terms of where I see the main recruitment pressure being from, I think it is literally that although there may well be good enough players to fill up the slots in guilds that have them, I think a lot of them are trapped in guilds where they're not going to push progress as high, and they're not going to push at all. But they stay in those guilds because they think they will. They don't actually realise, or maybe they just don't realise that they could compete in a much higher progressed guild. I mean, sometimes it's down to a bit of delusion as well, but that's more for the 3rd video. But just as one quick example, occasionally when I sort of contact people and I sort of say to them, are you interested? And they'll say no, they're looking for something much higher. And for some of them, you understand why. They're actually really good players, and they will get into something much higher. And some of them, you look at them and you think, well, we'd be interested in you because you'd be about average, maybe even average to a little bit below average. But, we need someone, and you might be the best of what we can get. And then you'll look and you'll be thinking to yourself, I'm not sure you're really worth a guild as high as you're thinking of, though. And then you'll notice a couple of weeks later, they're still looking for a guild. Maybe they got into one of those guilds and failed trial. That's, they did move. 2 weeks later, they're still looking for a guild. It hasn't worked out. Or maybe they just never did find another guild. And you just think to yourself, yeah, because sometimes it's a case of you can't actually judge guilds very well. Maybe you overestimate your own guild, or maybe you overestimate yourself. So we've got all those things into the mix as well. But that's for other videos coming up. The next video, as I say, is going to be a much more informative one, much less subjective, because that's going to be on the process. I'm going to go through my process of recruiting. A few things in there might be useful for other people who are recruiting as well. Some of the people who do recruit who've got even better ideas might be able to post those as well. So I'll be looking forward to that. I'll be aiming to get that out tomorrow. So I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share as always. And until next time, I'll see you later.